And call the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Time I would ask Ms. Engel to do the roll call, please.
Terry Engel here. Joanne Maloney is remote. She's here. Rich Mueller.
Here.
Travis Rao.
Here.
Dan Schmidt is absent. Lauren Shanerock.
Here.
And Rick Schultz.
Here. We have an agenda in front of us this evening. Are there any additions or corrections, Mr. Maya?
Nope, everything's as is.
Would entertain a motion to approve.
So move.
Second. Motion made by Mr. Mueller, seconded by Mr. Rout to approve the agenda as presented. Ms. Engel, please.
Terry Engel, aye. Travis Rao.
Aye.
Rick Schultz.
Aye.
Joanne Maloney. Aye. Lauren Shanerock.
Aye.
Rich Mueller.
Aye.
Dan Schmidt is absent.
Thank you. Do we have any public comments that you're aware of this evening?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. We will move right into the superintendent's report. Mr. Mayak, please.
Yeah, before I introduce our guest from SiteLogic, just a couple things here to mention. An update on some COVID information that our 7th and 8th grade, we have seen a increase in the number of students that have tested positive. I gave you a copy of our threshold, and if by following that, the number of 8th grade students have met that threshold, and we are having a mask requirement for our 7th and 8th grade then for 2 weeks wearing masks while at school and during the school day activities. The same thing is true of one of our kindergarten sections here at the elementary. That number again is at 10%, so roughly 3 students in one particular classroom. And we have 3 in a kindergarten section, like I said, and so that grade level as well will be wearing masks for the next 10 to 14 days. Our staff numbers, some good news, our staff numbers of absences due to COVID have decreased. That's not to say it's still easy to find subs and to fill the classrooms, as many of our office workers and administrators are in the classroom subbing, but again, the good news is that those numbers have decreased. And then lastly, just a quick note that the budget process for the next school year has been started with meetings with the administrative team, scheduled meetings with Angie and technology, and Heather Harms with special ed, and Dan Stork and the activities director. So different meetings like that have been scheduled, and some of them have taken place with the administrative team. Carla helped me out. It's our intention to bring information or report at the March or February? March meeting to you as we continue on with that process and solidify numbers and prepare the budget for next year. So if there's any questions on those 3 items, or if there's no questions on those 3 items, we'll move forward.
The mask mandates in the classes that have them, if their numbers drop in 7 days, does the mask mandate continue for the full 14 days, or is it flexible?
What we're doing, and Mr. Jurens has implemented here, is from the last contact or the last positive case in that classroom, taking that and going 14 days out from that point. And so, because the whole process does lose some days, and as we discover positive cases and whatnot. And help me out on this one. The exact dates for that your situation would take us about 10 days.
Yeah, so we just learned today about, we just got caught up with learning that there were 3 students in one kindergarten class who were positive, but the last time any of those students were in school was last Thursday. So then we go 14 days from last Thursday.
So it's a 14-day, but the start date is backtracked or retro to the being in the building, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? And this, again, this document that you have in front of you, that was shared in one of the newsletters here recently, but just to have that and to reference that as our guideline or our threshold for the COVID situation. We'll move along to Site Logic then. We have Matt and Sharon. I'll turn it over to you two and can introduce yourselves more than that, but they have, as part of the agreement that we have with them, we met as buildings and ground committees last night and got some a presentation and really got into more of the information, and they'll come back now tonight and share with the entire board their findings and their assessment results.
Okay. That's good. Or make it so the audience can see as well. Well, thank you, Mr. Miak and Chair Schultz, board members, thanks for the opportunity to be with you tonight. What we're going to do is share what we call a facility assessment review. Last night we had the opportunity to share a little bit more in depth with the facilities committee. Tonight will be still very in depth because the choice of the facilities committee was to make sure that the entire board got a chance to hear some of those details. But we did pare some things back just for the sake of time, wanting to meet a certain time threshold. So with that, I'm going to dive right in. Sharon is with us here tonight, and she's going to really be diving into the engineering components of things. So we'll start with introductions here in a second. I'll introduce Sharon and her credentials, the planning process and milestones. I'll go through that. We've been engaged with the district for about 6 months or so, and have dove into your facilities and are doing what's called the asset condition assessment, which is what really the meeting is going to be about, sharing a report card of all your different physical assets within the district. And we'll talk about next steps and answer any questions that you might have. I want to start by saying you've done a really nice job. Your last bond referendum and just with your LTFM, you're doing a nice job of doing some work to continue to upgrade the facilities. We call that in our industry catch up and keep up. So you're doing a really nice job of catching up. We're here to support you as a partner, and previously with Dale and now with Mike and Carla, and having those conversations with the facilities committee, coming in, helping you continue that catch-up process and then stay in the process of keeping up. And that's really where every district wants to be with the long-term facility maintenance dollars, making sure that you have a learning environment that's conducive for students. So with that, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm a senior educational consultant with Site Logic. I'm a former superintendent. I served in superintendency for about 11 years with the Tri-City United and the Jordan Public School District. I was an educator as well. I really got a chance to be a part of facility projects, sort of gravitated toward this as my second career or third career, however you want to look at it, and enjoying the work that we do at Site Logic. I believe in the partnerships that we form with districts. What's unique about us is we're strictly K-12. We have folks like me that can help bridge the gap between the technical aspects of what Sharon and her team does from an engineering standpoint, but also understanding the school world and understanding budgets and understanding how things need to work from a political and programmatic standpoint. So that's a little bit about me. We have Sharon Haye, Director of Development Engineering. Very fortunate to have Sharon as part of this project. She's top notch. I get a chance to work with a number of engineers. You have the best. And she's got a number of years of experience, strictly in K-12, serving as an engineer, and has been really leading up the team on this particular district and project. So diving into planning milestones, again, we started back in August, September, and our job then was to start survey work, start to comb through the different assets that you have in the building, and do what we call an asset condition assessment. And we typically, our process looks at 3 different components: the physical, the educational, and functional needs. Since you've done some significant work with those educational and functional needs, Mike and Carla made that decision and said, you know what, we want to really focus on the physical needs side of things. So that's really what this FAR presentation is. The facility assessment review is focused on those physical needs assessment work. So that's where we are right now, January of '22, delivering what we call again the FAR, the Facility Assessment Review to you. Tonight you're going to hear an asset conditions review. We're going to review the staff surveys with you and start talking a little bit about some ideas and opportunities. Moving forward to March, again, these are target dates, subject to change in scheduling. We will then come back with what we call a comprehensive assessment review. So at that point in time, we'll continue to take feedback. We'll provide a detailed review of some facility improvement options, and then also provide some rough order magnitude project savings and budgets for you to ponder and to workshop. Which leads us to workshopping, and that's when we go through a prioritization exercise as we help you build your 10-year plan. You're probably familiar with that. You submit it in July each year. So working with you to develop that and talking about some scope and some funding options. We do have finance analysts on our team as well that we look at all the different funding options should you choose to move forward with a project. And then moving forward to program consensus, when if that time comes to look at the work that you did in workshopping and choose selected scopes, we will help you implement those programs in that program consensus focus. So you can see it's kind of to be determined. And again, these are all subject to change. These are just some targets that we established at this point in time. Should ask, are there any questions at this point? If not, I'm going to explain a little bit about our assessment process. This is how our planning process works. Again, we are exclusive K-12, so it really focuses on the needs of schools. We start by working with school districts to understand visioning. So we met with your administrative team, understand and know the project work that you've done in the past. So really the goals and the objectives that we heard were, take a look at what we have, help us categorize the different needs that we have, and help us develop a plan to make sure that we continue that forward progress of updating our facilities and making sure that they're sound learning environments for students. And really that's our focus too. We want to make sure that this is the best learning environment for our students and staff. As I mentioned, we go into that physical assessment. We focus heavily on that physical needs, but we also can do in the future, if that was something the district desired, an educational and functional needs component of that assessment. We go into options that really are focused on that workshopping. This is really part of that tonight, is that facility assessment review. And we do the comprehensive assessment review, workshopping, prioritization, and then develop a consensus. And it is not a linear process. We are not like your typical, this is one of the things that I like about working for SiteLogic. I did a number of projects with some traditional firms as well. And typically they're looking at one focus area, they want to do a project and they want to get out. We want to be your partner for the long term, and we want to make sure that you're serving your students well, and we know that's your mission and vision as well. Jump forward here. This just talks about it, and I'm not going to talk specifically about the educational and functional needs, but we'll look at the quality of environment. Tonight, we're also going to share that asset condition assessment. We'll talk about safety and security, energy optimization, and site evaluation. That's typically our scope of work in that physical needs assessment. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sharon as she presents to you that asset condition assessment within the physical needs. Sure.
So those of you that went through this last night, obviously it's a little bit familiar. Breaking down that physical assessment into 3 pieces. The first part is the comprehensive asset assessment. That's where we're looking at the infrastructure, some of that life expectancy and how well it's operating, and how it's interacting with the maintenance staff. Indoor environmental assessment, that's when we're looking at the impact of your infrastructure on the educational environment. When I jump into that category, you're going to see some of that testing that we've done in your facilities, and I can explain some of the results that we had and what that means. And lastly, the facility optimization. That's when we start looking through your operation and maintenance and your utility expenditures. Really looking at, are there ways that we can be saving energy and directing some of those funds back into your general fund of the district. So jumping into that first piece, We break the building down into 16 categories. Blacktop to rooftop, and in between gets looked at. It's really a holistic approach to your building infrastructure. We start by looking at the building age, so we do have a breakdown of your building age. The bar would be the oldest piece of the building, and the blue dots in the middle are the average age. So you do see you do have some aging infrastructure in the facility, and not uncommon for school districts, so something unexpected there. Next thing we do is start looking at the age of the facility, looking at when the additions were put on. So this would be a map of your secondary school. Original construction in 1953, with additions put on in 59, 69, 91, and the most recent one in 2020. Jumping over to your elementary school, the original construction in 1956, with additions put on in 62, 66, and 94. And so this is really where we get a starting point for when we're doing that infrastructure assessment, is how old is that equipment. Knowing that the original construction, we probably don't have 1956 air handlers in there anymore. So we do look at that too. When was it updated, and how well is it interacting with your maintenance staff? How well is it operating, and what's the reliability? So next thing we do is look at is expected, your infrastructure's expected life. There we go, a little tongue twister there. I think I do that almost every time I say this slide. Maybe I need to practice it a little bit more. ASHRAE puts out standards for life expectancy of building equipment. They go through and they do a lot of testing. They do a lot within the industry to be able to put this out. So this is what we use as our benchmark. Kind of jumping into here, here's your secondary school. You've got some bar charts. The bars on the left are the average life expectancy determined by ASHRAE. And the bars on the right in orange, that's your actual age of the asset. Now, I know you all have some of those thick books in front of you. All of this information is in there, along with some.
I didn't bring them.
Okay. So they are available for those that did not receive copies last night. We'll certainly make sure that you get some. And if you need additional copies, please let us know.
I think we have enough.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So it's a little bit hard to see on here, but turning the bars red of the pieces that are past that useful life. But you can see, Matt talked about that catch-up, keep-up. You can see where the district has made some significant investments in your infrastructure, that you're not getting a lot of these very expensive MEP systems that are over that useful life. So that's definitely showing up here that the district has made investments there. The pieces that you are seeing above that useful life, you've got domestic water piping. Sometimes that's not related to indoor air quality, but definitely goes above the ceiling. It doesn't have a lifespan. Some of your older electrical distribution panels, you've got some control systems that are beyond their life expectancy. I throw this up here, I like to relate things to cars. You've probably heard this analogy a couple times from me, but similar to when your car gets beyond its warranty period, that's your car's life expectancy. That doesn't mean you're gonna go out and get a new one. It just means that you're probably gonna bring it into the shop a little bit more. It might be less reliable. It's gonna cost you a little bit more money to keep it running. Same thing happens with the building infrastructure. So it's just a way to relate what these bar charts mean. So we've got a couple more bar charts in the book. In the sake of time, I didn't go through all of them here. But then we step forward through beyond that life expectancy, and that's how reliable is that piece of equipment? Is it operating the way it was designed? Is your maintenance staff able to keep it running? Is it draining your maintenance budget? So all of that comes together, what we call asset condition assessment. You can see we've got a couple of different category ratings. Excellent is usually that piece of infrastructure is brand new. We've got acceptable, maybe it's a few years old, it's still running very, very well, as we would expect. Caution, still running well, but that's something that maybe we need to start planning for that eventual replacement. Maybe we're 5, 10, 15 years out from wanting to put that on the plan for replacement. You get into the alert and the alarm pieces, and those are more of those immediate need pieces of infrastructure. So just a way to kind of read the color coding as I'm working through this. We create an asset condition summary. I know this is very busy, but really what it breaks down to, we've got our description of what the asset is. So this first line is boilers, and again, this will be in your books. The category relating to those 16 different categories I talked about a little bit earlier. The area of building it served, And then we get into this life expectancy. So you've got the average life expectancy when it was installed. And then these two columns here are really kind of the ones that are going to mean the most to you. The first column here is asset condition assessment. That is the assessment that our technical team has put on that piece of infrastructure. So that's looking at how well it's operating, what we found with our testing, what we found with your maintenance staff, and coming up with our assessment of that infrastructure. The second column is age adjusted. That takes our assessment and factors in that equipment age. So that's how we get beyond that useful life and looking at how is it operating, how is it impacting your building. So this column is really the one that we're going to reference moving forward, is this age adjusted, and you have notes over on the right. So obviously if you're looking through the books, you have questions later, please feel free to ask. Our technical team spends quite a bit of time filling this out. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit easier to catch at a glance, we take this age-adjusted column and we put together a pie chart for your building. So it's a little bit easier to see. It's weighted with the value of that infrastructure. So here at I'm in the elementary school. This is the secondary school I've got up right now. You can see a lot of that new infrastructure that you just invested in. Some of the infrastructure that was invested in recently. Some of those pieces that they're not quite ready for replacement yet, but maybe start planning for them in the future. And then here are some of those pieces that maybe weren't able to be addressed during that last project. So definitely not a huge chunk of that pie, but there are some pieces of the building, and I don't think that's surprising, but as Matt talked about, that catch up, keep up, that's what we're seeing here. So I don't know if you wanted to add anything to this, or if there's questions, pause for just a minute.
The only thing to add, and Sharon mentioned it, is you'll see much more detailed information in that blue book. Carla, if you can kind of hold that up. So every board member, you'll have that. We just, again, pared it back to make sure that you got a sample here, and we'll talk through that so that when you take a look at it later on, you can reference what we shared. And like Sharon said, be sure to address those questions. We're happy to answer any that you have.
I actually get excited when I get to talk more about buildings, so please feel free. All right. Keep running. Diving into some of the systems at your high school, we've got 2 hot water boilers that were installed in 2008. Lots of life left on them. Things that we noticed, they aren't necessarily the highest efficiency that you can get, so they're not condensing. So, but obviously you do still have modulating burners, and the fact that it's hot water, you're getting a lot of controllability from that, and some efficiency from that as well. You did electrical switchgear update in 2020, so obviously that is brand new and in great shape. That's also on the list when we looked at building infrastructure. And then there are some older electrical panels throughout the building, so when we're looking at technology working into the classroom, that could be a bit of a hindrance when you're looking at classroom loads for all the technology and when the system was designed. And jumping over to the elementary school, we've got the same bar charts over here. I just have one up because there's another one in those books. A little bit more infrastructure that's beyond its useful life here, but you're still seeing some of those investments that were made recently as well. Believe it or not, I've had seen these charts where you've got a majority of red, so it's actually looking pretty good. And then here is that pie chart for the elementary school, seeing some of those newer systems, quite a bit that's in that, let's start planning for that replacement in 5, 10, 15 years. And then quite a bit in alert and alarm as well for some of those other systems, and I can get into that as we go through the presentation. Some of those heavier systems, talking about those in elementary school, boilers installed in 2008, same situation here. I think I made a joke last night, I'll make it again. It looks like the same picture, but it's not. Keep moving. The 2020 switchgear was upgraded just very recently with your last project. And you do have some outdated electrical panels in this facility as well. Okay, so that's wrapping up comprehensive asset assessment. We just went through some of that infrastructure questions about life expectancy or anything surprising as I'm kind of working through. All right, I'll keep going. Indoor environmental assessment, this is when we're kind of breaking down and we're looking at the infrastructure's impact on the learning environment. The first thing we look at is indoor air quality and ventilation. Obviously, this district puts a very, knows the importance of indoor air quality with where you've made investments in the past. We did go through and do CO2 testing. Maybe start out by saying this isn't testing that's done routinely. It's something that we do as we do building assessment. So it's not something a district has done on a routine basis. Looking at the readings done at the secondary school, you do have some that turned up red. The majority of them are just on the cusp of that cutoff. So we say if it's above 1,000 parts per million, that's when we start flagging it and say, yeah, we probably should introduce a little bit more outside air. This one is the 1,004. I mean, it's very close. This one over here is 1,008. So while it's red on here, it's not something where, you know, our team went, wow, this is really concerning. There were a couple of spaces down here. This one's 1880, and I'll get into, you know, what's causing that in a minute. But for the majority, this looks really good for CO2 levels. What we did is after we took these snapshot readings, we went and launched a few data loggers in a couple of these spaces to say, all right, well, this is a snapshot in time. What is it doing throughout the whole day? Because that varies depending on how many kids are in the space and the activity that's going on. And so this is room 109. So you can see it peaked at 10 a.m. at 9:60, but otherwise you're definitely down in this lower yellow range. And you can see where the school day started off at 4:40. Jumping into that room that had some of the higher levels, you can see it peaked out at 1580, and definitely kind of some of the activity that was going on in that space. So some higher readings in this particular classroom.
The reason why we measure carbon dioxide is it's a tracer gas that really can help us diagnose or look into some of the equipment and how it's functioning, as Sharon mentioned. You know, it's clearly when you reach certain threshold, maybe not introducing as much outside air and ventilation. So we have to, that's a way to figure out where the issues are, and then we can dive into those problems.
Yeah, and it's not dangerous at these levels, so I've never seen dangerous levels in school. I just want to make sure I say that. The red can sometimes be a little bit alarming. But when we did find the higher levels, we know that all of that equipment in there is new, so you start digging into what's going on in there, what's causing this. So down, what I'm going to focus on is this little area here, because these other pieces were so low, so close to that cusp that we just kind of said, you know what, we're not going to worry about those. They're, you know, a little bit of a tweak on that air damper position, and it's a fix. But these pieces down here are served by AC3 installed in 2020. Jumping into what that looks like on your energy management system. So this is what controls the unit. It's the brain of the building and what tells it to do with your energy management system. You have a CO2 sensor in your return air duct. So what happens is all the air coming back from those 3 classrooms gets mixed together, and that's what reads it. And that reading is what's controlling the amount of air coming in from the outside. So because you've got 2 classrooms that are a higher level and one that's got, here, I think I got it on the next slide, yeah. So you've got 2 classrooms that are higher levels. This one's 1880, this one's 1185. But you have this one over here that didn't have any students in it. So this level, although we didn't measure it because no one was there, would be a lot lower just because no one's in there to build up any CO2. All of that gets mixed together and it looks like everything's okay. So going in and taking this and setting a minimum threshold, we could potentially put CO2 sensors in the spaces, or like I said, go back into this program and set the minimum damper positions higher, or even lower this return air CO2 set point. We'll be able to clear that up. So the good news is you've got the infrastructure in place. It was designed properly. It's just a sequence or control issue that can get cleared up with some recommissioning. So I'm going to pause. I know that's a lot of technical data, so I want to make sure that I answer questions and everything's explained thoroughly.
So Sharon, if you could just explain, so when a project is complete after mechanical units are installed, you're probably familiar with this, that you typically commissioning occurs after that to make sure it's functioning as it was designed and it's installed. And every so often, because they are mechanical components, they get out of whack, just like, you know, your lawnmower or whatever. And you have to do what's called a recommissioning exercise. So that's what Sharon was referencing there. And it's really kind of looking at the equipment, rebalancing it, recalibrating it to make sure it's functioning as it was designed. So that's kind of in that lay terms what recommissioning looks like. Period.
Just a quick question for you. So when you've tested these rooms for CO2, there have been students or somebody in the room when you test them, correct?
Yep, so there's optimum. What we like to do is make sure we go out when the weather's nice and cold. We want to catch it when your outside air dampers are kind of dialed back to their minimum position. If we did this testing in the spring or the fall, I doubt you'd have any concerns because you're bringing a lot of outside air just because it's tempered outside. You're not at 0 degrees. So we try and get out usually when it's below freezing to make sure we're catching it at the minimum position. And then we'll test usually after about 10 a.m. We want the levels to build up a little bit. So that's why we take the data loggers as well, so you can see that. But we also want to see, all right, at its worst case, are we bringing in enough outside air? So that's really kind of what we're doing with that testing.
Okay.
Yeah, because they're designed to sense that and bring it in. That's, I mean, the higher the CO2, as Sharon said, it's not harmful, but it does make you tired. You know, it will make you sleepy over time.
Alright. So just highlighting a few of the systems that are over at the secondary school. We've got a couple of rooftop units installed in 2009. So they've got 5 years projected life remaining. They are operating well. Might be able to stretch that out, but those are, some of those equipment that you're going to see in that caution condition as you're looking at doing your planning. And you do have some VAV boxes that are past their useful life. So this is some of that equipment that's up in the ceiling that wasn't addressed during that last project. So you got the main equipment done, but some of those ancillary pieces weren't upgraded. And I can kind of show you what happens to these as they get beyond their life. These control boards have a tendency to fail and to start having issues with some of the components in there. And I've got some examples of what that looks like. Jumping over to your elementary school, this is the CO2 levels that we measured here. Obviously you've got a lot of red over in this area, and similar to that other school, I can jump through that. And then just one other room up here, it's 1016, again, just over that threshold, so nothing that we dig into going, oh my goodness, what happened there? It's still pretty low. So that one piece over here, oh, and I've got a couple data loggers. I'm jumping ahead here. So even that 1080, I think that was one of the rooms we logged, and was only out there for probably an hour and then came back down. And then here's one of the rooms over in that red area, kind of peeking out at 1270. You can see kind of maybe the students coming in and out of the room and some of the activities that were being done that day. So looking at that area of the building, it's served by ASU 4, which is installed in 1993. So jumping into what that piece of equipment is doing, we start looking at mixed air temperatures and return air. So you might not be able to see this, it's probably pretty fine print. But over here, this is your mixed air damper. So this is what's controlling how much outside air is coming into that air handler. It's set at 20%. When we start going through and we look at the temperature sensors, you're actually getting really no outside air coming through there. So there's something going on with that damper, an issue with either the damper itself or the actuator that's not bringing in outside air into that unit. So it's not surprising that whole area has high CO2 levels because there's no air coming through. And it's hard to see this stuff. I know we talked about that last time, and I'll get into it in a minute, but your buildings are very comfortable. So you wouldn't know that this is an issue unless you go out and do the testing, and that's not normally done. So we do find these things quite often. And Matt, if you have anything you wanted to add, please feel free. But,
I mean, yeah, you kind of hit the nail on the head, so.
yeah. All right, I'm jumping in. I got a couple pictures of those units designed in 1993. So definitely want to check and make sure that those heating coils are designed for current codes, but obviously they're designed for more than no outside air. So we're going to take a look at that. But we also put in DX coils into those units in 2020. So obviously you want to get the lifespan out of that equipment as well. But highlighting that for you and jumping into temperature and humidity. So just pause briefly, ask if there are questions about the indoor air quality testing or any of the air handlers for the EMS system in the buildings. All right. Temperature and humidity. This is when we're going through and making sure all the temperatures and spaces are where we want them. Obviously, if it's hot and humid, you want to lay down and take a nap. Same thing if it's cold, you're just not able to pay attention as much, so we want to make sure that that learning environment is within the ranges that we like to see, and that your staff are able to control them. So this is the survey results for your secondary school. I talked last night, I have never seen any of these with no red on it. This actually looks very good. I've seen some of them where these red bars are all the way over here. So this is good. The only piece that I would take away from this chart is down here where you've got some staff saying that it's too cold in the winter. And I can go into some of that in a minute. I'm guessing that's your recommissioning opportunities and then some of those boxes that are getting older. And then here are the results over the elementary school. Again, looking very, very good over here as well. A couple of, about 30% saying the lights are too bright, but otherwise really good survey results. So your staff is very comfortable in the buildings that they're in. Jumping in, you have dehumidification throughout both buildings, minus your shop area over the secondary school. Not uncommon just because of the doors that get open over there. It's not a space that usually gets a lot of cooling. And then over your elementary, the stage, but it's open to the gym, so I'm guessing a lot of that just kind of drifts that way. Taking a look at the temperature readings, we do temperature readings at the same time we take the CO2 readings. Over at the secondary, a majority of it's green. Looks like you were rising temperature a little bit in the cafeteria. We did take that during lunch. You're seeing there's a lot of kids in there at that point. I'll probably calm down kind of in between those periods. And then over in your locker area, it was a little cold in there, but you're not having instruction in that space, so not as worrisome. Over at the elementary school, all within that green range, so great temperature readings that we found when we were walking around the buildings. We did do some data logging. I have one here. There's a couple more in your books. This one was over at the secondary school, starting at about 68 degrees at about 6 a.m. So by the time your students get in and your staff, it's warmed up, and then it peaks out at about 72.8, almost 73 degrees at 2:15 in the afternoon. Right, highlighting a few of the pieces there. We did talk about the rain or the energy management system and how that's impacting some of those dampers. You do have pneumatic controls underneath that, so that computer system talks through some EP switches to help modulate these. But this technology is outdated. We actually have trouble finding people to work on these just because it's no longer used. And they're definitely more like something to keep up with. So the diaphragms and things within these pieces of equipment need to be replaced or recommissioned every 7 to 9 years. And when they fail open to make sure nothing freezes. So that's why you can sometimes get areas that might be a little hot just because of this type of control system or the components that are in it. I also have one shot of one of the boxes and kind of what that looks like. And you can see over here the room temperature set point was 68. And it was up at almost 75. Now the damper position here is at 100%. So when these boxes say, hey, I'm too hot, I need cooling, the damper opens 100% to bring cold air in. And if it's in heating, it'll shut down and actually modulate the hot water valve to heat it up. So we know that the box is saying, hey, I need cooling, I'm 100% open. And the temperature coming into the box is 63. So theoretically, we should be getting 63-degree air out of that box, able to cool down the space. But it's not cooling down the space, and our CFM average is at 0. So knowing that this was installed in 93 and those control boards fail, my guess is that damper has failed and it's no longer modulating, and that's why you're getting that elevated temperature in there. All right. Something else on the energy management system. This is a situation where you've got simultaneous heating and cooling. Which isn't going to affect the temperature. The temperature coming out of the unit is fine, but you're spending some extra utilities heating up air from the outside that doesn't necessarily need to be heated. I talked about bringing in outside air and making sure you got enough. On the flip side of that, you don't want to bring in too much outside air because now we're spending extra utilities to heat or cool it when we don't have to. So, finding that right balance of how much is enough outside air to make sure we're keeping our CO2 levels down and having covering our air quality, and we're not spending too much on utilities. So definitely things that we're looking at as we're walking around the buildings. Next piece is lighting. Pause briefly for questions. everyone got them out last time, it's a pretty quiet group. All right. Next is lighting. Lighting has a big impact on how we perceive our environment. Obviously, when we are in a classroom, we want to bring natural light in. And that's not always possible, especially if you don't have a lot of windows. So going towards an LED, that light spectrum is as close to natural daylight as we have in the industry. So obviously something that we like to look at. We do go out and do light level testing. When we do this, we slip all the lights on. So that's not saying if you do have any sort of dual level switching in the classrooms, they might not be using it this way. But anything that is a green light bulb, that's right within the range we'd like to see. If it's yellow, that is above, so there's an opportunity for some energy savings there. They have all the light they need for the task at hand. And if it's red, that's below what we'd like to see in that space. So the only areas that we're below is that locker area. Apparently it doesn't like to be heated and it doesn't like to have enough light, but it's lockers, so not as concerned about that. And then we don't have the light that we normally see in the gym. But otherwise, all of your educational spaces have adequate light, along with maybe an opportunity to save some energy there. Switching over to your elementary, very similar situation. Excuse me. The yellow light bulbs, opportunities to save energy, along with a few areas that maybe could use a little bit more.
It's interesting, if you go back to the survey results at the elementary, they said it was too bright. So if you look there, that makes sense, because there are some overlit spaces.
Jumping in, we do have a few pictures of, you have fluorescent lighting in majority of the facilities. There are a couple areas where you've got some LED, but definitely an opportunity to integrate some LED lighting into your classrooms, as well as outside. You've got some aging fixtures outside. What's nice about lighting is not only is it better for the classroom environment, but you save a lot of energy doing it, and you save a lot of maintenance. So I know we had quite a bit of discussion on that last night. Acoustics. A lot of classroom recipes are done audibly, so obviously we care a lot about making sure that it's quiet in those classrooms so those teachers can teach. Going through and looking at our sound level map, if it's red, that's obviously above what we would want. I know that one is a shop, and there was some other equipment running in there, so not surprising that one was a little high. But otherwise, lots of green and a little bit of yellow. Jumping into one of these classrooms, I picked one that had a mix. So you can see these over here were just over that 35 dBA mark, which is, when I say 35 dBA, that's basically silent in the background. When I'm doing the sound testing, if someone starts talking, my meter will jump up to about 60. So for reference, if you're down at 35, even 40, that's considered very good for classrooms. So you've got great sound attenuation. Your teacher should have no problem whatsoever talking to the students and vice versa. If any of the students tell you it's an issue with background noise, probably not. And there's over at the elementary school, you do have over here, guessing there's probably a little bit of noise from the fan coming through the ductwork, but again, nothing that would cause us concern with what we're seeing in here. Aesthetics and building quality, this is the last section for that indoor learning environment category. This is where we're starting looking at some of more of that infrastructure. Starting from the outside, exterior envelope, definitely some opportunities for tuck pointing. I know, understanding that there was some done recently and you're now on a schedule to get this done. But definitely some areas where water is able to penetrate into the building. So we want to make sure that that gets sealed up so we're not getting water into our building materials, because that will degrade them a lot faster. Also some deteriorating windows. Understanding that one is on order and that's going to be replaced here soon, which is great. But definitely opportunities for looking at both energy efficiency and then just making sure that students and staff that are next to those windows aren't experiencing draft or big temperature fluxes. Exterior doors, obviously those get deteriorated over time. They take quite a beating outside, so did see some of those. Looking at the grounds, some cracked sidewalks. This isn't everywhere, but we do pull some of those more extreme photos out. I think everyone here kind of knows the condition of the parking lot. It's definitely got a lot of webbing in it and some cracks in the sidewalk. Obviously these are trip hazards as you're walking around, so looking at those. We had our roof experts come out and take a look at the roofing. So we've got this is over at your secondary school. They didn't see any need for improvements over there. And I will get into one thing that they brought up with your built-up roofs in just a minute. And then jumping over to your elementary school, you've got a couple of sections that are in need of replacement, along with a few that can be restored or retrofitted. So it's a little bit more cost effective if you don't have to go in and completely replace it. Which is great. You can get a few more years of life before you spend all of those dollars fully replacing it. They wanted to make sure you brought up, so you've got built-up roofing systems. These are great. They have a very long lifespan, a lot less, tendency to spring leaks just because of the type of construction. But there are a few areas where they're starting to bubbling. They had bubbling, and they had some concerns with some of that workmanship, so they wanted to come back out and check it in the spring, when things are de-thawed, and just verify that. And I know there were a couple areas that came up last night just with some leaks, so we're going to make sure our roofing experts know about those. It sounds it's really on the perimeter of the building, so maybe some of the roof flashing. Definitely have them take a look at that in further detail. Interior finishes. We got a lot of maps in your book. You can't tell, we really love our maps and our colors. So this is flooring systems. We have all the different types of flooring system in the building, along with its grade. So you can use that for future planning. We talked about those Ds. Those are kind of those 5, maybe 7, 10-year out needs. And then if you get into the Ds, those are more of, maybe we start planning for that now. So that's kind of how we went through and did the flooring. Got a couple pictures of what that looks like. Obviously some stains and ripples, but really for the most part, just bounce back. It really doesn't look too bad, but you do have some that start to make a plan for replacing those. Ceiling maps, and we have these for each of the buildings. I'm just going through a couple of them. Again, looking at the type of ceiling and then the assessment for its condition and helping to plan for when that should be replaced into that long-term facility maintenance plan. A couple examples of maybe some stained tiles, but majority of it looks pretty good. Excuse me. There was one wall crack. We're still looking into what's causing this one, but definitely something to keep in the planning phase to address that as we go through and do solutions. We'll bring that back for you. Lockers. I've seen these completely blown out at the bottom, so not too bad, but they are starting to rust. We live in Minnesota, and salt and snow gets in there, and it just does a number on the bottom of those lockers. Technology systems. We talked about the PA was updated in 2011. It was the front end, not the speakers themselves. This was not done in 2011, but the PA system's working, and then you've got an original block system. So we did look at casework as well. And we've got a couple of photos here of what those look like. And I do have some highlights of some of the work that you have done recently. I know those fact slabs and the science labs and whatnot, they get pretty expensive. So we'll go through and I can highlight some of that work. They do look like beautiful spaces. And you have some aging casework as well that we've got captured as you're doing your planning. And just highlighting some of those recent projects. And bathroom upgrade. We've got brand new tile everywhere, new fixtures, new partitions. It looks really nice in there. Here's your metal shop, which is great. The CTE programs, everyone is asking for those at this point. So this is a really great space to have to be attracting students and really growing that program. And then your science lab that was obviously recent remodeled. Again, a space that really looks nice in there for students and staff to utilize. But wanting to highlight some of those recent projects the district has done as we're, looking at what are the needs, but also what's been done. So, last piece is facility optimization. Maybe pause briefly and ask if there are questions about the indoor environment.
I'd just like to highlight, Sharon mentioned it, but celebrate those great things that have been done. You're doing stuff that everybody's talking about right now. I don't know if it's COVID or related, coming out of this pandemic, but everybody's doing CTE spaces. So you've done some significant work in areas that have become sort of like a focus, refocus on education, some of that auto shops and metals and woods and those types of areas, but also that fax lab. You know, again, for whatever reason, that's really hot right now. We see it across the state. We've done several projects, so kudos to you for investing in those programs. And also, remember, you know, these are buildings that are just like our homes. Things age out over time. We have to continue to plan and replace for them, but don't get away from celebrating all the great stuff too.
Absolutely. Those are expensive spaces. Last one is facility optimization, jumping into the utility usage. This is total expenditures for a year. Looking at your secondary schools, obviously higher than your elementary, we would expect that as it's a little bit bigger building, so nothing unusual there. Bulk of your spending is electric, again, nothing unusual with gas, and then water as the last piece, the smallest. Diving in a little bit more, here is the breakdown cost per square foot. I know a question came up last night. When I look at this, and I've seen a lot of buildings, there's nothing in here that makes me go, whoa, that's a lot. They're spending a lot on utilities. Also knowing that you've got opportunities for doing some lighting, and I can jump into that a little later. There are some opportunities for saving energy, but your district has been very good at making sure that you're using your utility dollars wisely. I've seen some of these that were up at $2 a square foot, and that's a concern. This is not. So make sure to bring that up. So that's something that your district's been doing a really good job of, is making sure that these aren't to a point where they shouldn't be. Jumping into some of those opportunities that you can look at for saving some energy is definitely on your control system. Recommissioning that energy management system, making sure we're bringing in enough outside air but not too much, that we're not simultaneously heating and cooling. And then also looking at taking out some of those pneumatics, so we're not getting the comfort complaints, we're not getting anything in full heat or full cool when it's not supposed to be. Retrofitting to LED lighting, not only is it great for the learning environment, but we save a lot of energy doing that. Opportunities for sealing up the building envelope. I know this is getting replaced, but anytime we can do some weather stripping around doors, and we recaulk around windows, up roof wall connections, sometimes that can get, anytime you can have untreated air entering in the building, that's extra utility dollars that you're spending to heat or cool it. So we want to make sure we're really sealing up the building envelope as best we can. And last piece is water efficiency. It's just going in and tuning flush valves on your toilets and your urinals, and then flipping out aerators on some of your sinks, just to make sure that those are low flow. And I know some of your new bathrooms have the low flow already, you can tell, because it's a pretty high velocity coming out of there. But yeah, looking on that, some of those older fixtures. So that really wraps up my section. Ask if there are questions for me before I give it back to Matt.
When you compare you compared like our electric costs and water costs and utilities, do you benchmark that with others buildings on a per square foot basis, so we can look at it and say, well, are we in the bottom third, are we half, are we in the top half, or are we top 10%?
I can look at it, yeah. I usually do it on request, so yeah, I can bring that back to you. The Minnesota has something called beat-free benchmarking, so I can pull that data and take a look at where you're at.
Thank you.
Yep. I'll bring that back next time on Miracle Study Specialty.
So Sharon gets the long part, I get the short part.
Yeah, I did talk a long time.
Gotta go the right direction here. So next steps, again, we've talked through this, so I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time, but really, we've spent a lot of time in building. Our engineers, our facility analysts, architectural team has dove in, really started to gather all this data, or has gathered all this data, which has brought us to this assessment tonight, or this, I call it a report card, sort of that sharing. We now kind of go away, at least on the forefront of being in the buildings, and I think Mike can attest, and Carla, the amount of time that was spent to put in doing the assessment. We now will work in the background, some of the requests, and taking a look deeper at those types of things. And what we'll do is we'll bring back some of those ideas and opportunities and some of that, what we call rough order magnitude pricing. So we take a look at the work that we've done around the state. We also look at national databases, RSVs, and we take a look at what pricing exists out there, and we're able to put some of those prices to, we're able to put those prices to the ideas and opportunities. So that's what we'll really bring back to you in this, what we call this is the FAR, and then this is called the CAR, the Comprehensive Assessment Review. So again, that's where we'll start to have those conversations, answer some of the questions that have come up over the last couple nights, dive a little bit deeper. And then based off of your feedback, get into prioritization and workshopping. Again, we're targeting April, and the reason why we look at that time frame, again, goes back to that LTFM planning. By July 31st, you have to submit your annual LTFM plan. And our work really on this physical needs side is aimed at helping you do that and looking at the proper funding sources to be able to do that. We're a program manager, so we have all of these different team members on the same team. So we have architects, engineers, facility analysts. We also have project managers. So not only do we help do the assessment work, we also help implement the projects that you choose. So should that be the case, that's where we kind of come to that program consensus, and we're able to implement those solutions for you that you may or may not select. So you can kind of see there, board approval, July at MDE, the Minnesota Department of Education submission. That's the typical process. So you're way ahead of the game. We're really kind of targeting that April. We can really start workshopping and go into program consensus almost immediately, depending on what your feedback and what your desires are there. So with that, we try to go as quickly as we could, but be as thorough as possible. So you have your books, your hardcover books, which is a nice little snapshot in time. Please take a look at those in detail. If you have any questions, direct them to Carla or Mike, and we certainly will dig into those questions for you and get those answered. So again, thanks for the opportunity to be with you tonight and be also a partner with your district as we've done this assessment.
Thank you. Very good information again.
Any questions? Well, we'll look forward to seeing you again. And seeing you.
Thank you. Thanks. Anything else in the reports then?
Yeah.
I'll let you introduce those then.
Sure. To wrap up with the reports, Mr. Durans and Mr. Bud do have some things to share with you. It looks like Nick is setting up. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Durans.
So I see that the report is not in the agenda, so I'll make sure that I at least get you my January newsletter. I've had the help of some of my staff to get a lot of great things that are going on, including a lot of pictures and stuff of what's going on here at the elementary. So I'll make sure I send all of you the January newsletter for this month. A few other things to report on. Here at the elementary, we do an annual fundraiser through Club's Choice. It used to be called the Coca-Cola Fundraiser. Did very well this year. That's run by our PTO, and we raised just right around $20,000 this year. We typically have that delivery of those items scheduled for around November. Sometimes board members hear complaints. We did get some complaints that due to all the other legs and goods arriving, the same was true with our fundraiser items. We actually didn't get that delivery until right before Christmas break, but we got all those items out. I believe it was December 20th that we got them out. It was supposed to be November 3rd, but it was out of the delivery company's hands. But another successful fundraiser, and the PTO always gives back to us graciously. So we're currently working on our winter assessments. We're doing our Compass and Pinell winter benchmarking, and then we're also doing our STAR assessments in reading and math. And I know Mara's been been busy getting ready for some data meetings coming up starting next week. We sent communication to families about our winter conferences here at the elementary. We have conferences on the 1st and the 3rd, those evenings. And so we sent communication to families about that. And along with that, we also have our annual Scholastic Book Fair that week, January 31st to the 4th. So we have families will have opportunities to shop at the book fair at conferences. Kids, we have a schedule set up for kids to shop at the book fair that week. And thank you to Sue and the Media Center for organizing that. We have Paraprofessional Appreciation Week coming up next week. And we've been working with Sue. Sue's got some nice treats ordered to help celebrate that next week. Panther Pride, I've been keeping up to date on that. We are bringing back our first Panther Pride Assembly since COVID. We're going to have that this Friday. You are all welcome to attend. We'll have it right here in the main gym, the stage gym at 9 o'clock. And so please stop by if you're able, 9 o'clock this Friday. And then we're also asking grade levels to set up some separate celebrations, just in their own grade levels, including games, crafts, and movies. And then just to update you on my professional development, I have my annual Minnesota Elementary School Principals Institute that's coming up next week. It's up in Bloomington on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. So, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mr. Bunn?
All right, we had a few years ago, I would say a number of years ago, we had Justin Patchen, who works for the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. He came and spoke to we did a 6th grade session, a 7-8 session, a 9-10 session, and 11-12 session, and a parent session regarding cyberbullying, and with some of the older kids focused more on internet safety and some of those things. And so very, very successful thing. I think I sent out the link of the parent one that we had at night, and we'll be able to keep that live, and had an agreement with Dr. Patchen until like February 2nd, I believe. So if you haven't had an opportunity, it's about an hour or so long. Some really great information and really a great resource for us. We too are STAR testing. We have Snow Week coming up. Our PE classes have been bowling, so we're kind of getting out and about outside the building as well. One Act, you know, they have some of their sections and subsections and stuff coming up, and band concert coming up, and we're just about at the end of semester 1. So, and you know, I mean, it's no secret we've had to juggle a lot of things with staffing at times. And so just hats off to the staff who've helped cover classes when we were short. They're truly amazing people that we've been working with, and just being able to pound through it, because we believe that in-person learning is certainly the highest priority and the best way to learn. If you head back over to the game, you'll see our sideline chairs came in, and those were compliments of Bank of Norrichland. Matt Harrington in particular was really helpful in spearheading and making sure that we got those. We're still waiting on the scores table, and I'm not totally sure we're waiting for the rack as well. So supply and demand, everything is kind of coming out of order, but we're happy to get those things in. New bleachers are functioning, they're more comfortable, not quite as much seating, but I think your overall experience when you're there is a lot better at least I can take it, I know, a lot better than the old hard ones that we had in there. So, that's what I got.
Very good.
Questions?
Thank you.
Dave, I'm probably, you may have to get back to us later on this, but when you mentioned One Act, it kind of struck me right before COVID hit. Remember when, wasn't it the PTO, or somebody funded an extra play in the spring, right?
Yeah,
But we
here
never
in
got-
elementary.
No, I don't remember where, I think so.
What was that called? Where they come in for Prairie Fire?
Prairie Fire Theater, we have them scheduled again, I believe it's April.
But wasn't there one in the high school too that,
I think they were going to do an additional one, I
but
believe.
maybe never got paid for it then. I just wondered how much more, if we're getting closer to getting back to normal, or more of those things are gonna happen, you know, because I thought, like I say, it was almost 2 years ago, but
Yeah,
if we had thought
know
about doing an extra one for the high school.
that, I know that they were working on the, at least I think Dan and the One Act directors were working on trying to come up or figure out a date for the public performance.
Yeah. I just hope we can continue to get back a little more normalcy here like that.
Normal kids.
That wraps up the report.
Thank you. Are there any board member comments this evening? Just like to mention that a few of us were able to attend the MSBA convention this past week, and though it was perhaps a little lighter attendance than a typical year, the quality of the programming there and the experience was very worthwhile. So thank you to those that attended, and hopefully next year we can add a few members to that. Our next regular meeting will be Tuesday, February 22nd, and that will be in Richland at the Secondary School Media Center. With that, we'll move into the consent agenda items, and Mr. Mayak, would you introduce those, please?
Yes, as always, the consent agenda, the board has been furnished with background materials on each item or has discussed it at a previous meeting. These items are acted upon with one vote without discussion, and if a board member wants to discuss any item, we'll pull it out of the consent agenda and we'll vote on it separately. We do have a number of donations to recognize here. We have a $450 donation from Bouchot Cousins for the vocal music program, a $1,000 donation from Freeborn County Co-op for a secondary library donation. Alex Wayne and Dustin Wayne are donating $2,000 each for our elementary programs. We have a $1,900 donation from First National Bank of Waseca for the guided reading materials. And then a $500 donation from the Mayo Clinic Foundation, and that we have actually some leeway and some flexibility how we would use that to a show of appreciation for staff through the last couple of years of COVID. So all total, we're at $4,250 this month in donations, and our year-to-date is $64,780.16. So with appreciation of those donations, I'd ask for the approval of the consent agenda as presented.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Rao, seconded by Mr. Shanerock to approve the consent agenda items as presented. Ms. Engel, please.
Terry Engel, aye. Travis Ralph,
Aye.
Rick Schultz,
Aye.
Joanne Maloney, Lauren Shanerock,
Aye.
Rich Mueller,
Aye.
Dan Schmidt is absent.
Motion carries. Anything in reports here, then we're pretty well covered there tonight, Mr. Meyer?
Yeah, that's correct.
And moving into recommended actions, the 23-24 school calendar already.
And with our organization meeting that we did take care of a couple other action items, just as the one action item for this meeting, and this is the 23-24 school year. We'll be asking for approval of one of the two options that's presented. As you've been informed and had some information presented, option A will eliminate the 2-hour late starts or early outs and then move that professional development to a one-day program that would be held on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Option B would remain the same as our 22-23 school year, 23-24 school year, really kind of just keeping the late starts and the early outs and not having that full day of professional development. So I'd ask for a motion on either or, the board to vote on what their preference would be.
I'll make a motion for option A to eliminate the late starts and early hours.
I'll second that.
Motion has been made by Mr. Mueller, seconded by Ms. Engel to approve option A for the 23-24 school calendar as it is presented. Is there any further discussion? Again, I'll just add that we appreciate the staff and the administration working through this adjustment, I guess I would call it. We feel that it is something that is going to be better utilized as the staff in a full day setting and versus the 2 days, or the 2 hours, excuse me, throughout the year. Again, some of the benefits I heard throughout the discussion of this was the interruption to families. Those 2-hour late starts or early outs can get challenging, especially for our youngest learners in the district. So happy that everyone is moving forward with that recommendation and approving that. So, any other further discussion on that subject?
Just a comment, I did talk to some of the instructors or teachers and staff, and they said that they just had one, was that last week or 2 weeks? Recently.
Yeah.
And they had an hour-and-a-half presentation, and they got done, and they thought, now if we could just get together and talk with our fellow staff members, that would be great, but nope, we don't have time, the students are starting to come, so they were really looking forward to the full day where they could better utilize their time and better utilize what they've learned, so I think it's a good idea.
Excellent. Ms. Engel, roll call vote, please.
Terry Engel, aye. Travis Ralph.
Aye.
Rick Schultz.
Aye.
Joanne Maloney. Aye. Lauren Shainrock.
Aye.
Rich Mueller.
Aye.
Dan Schmidt is absent.
Motion carries. Brings us to our final action item, and that is adjournment. If there's a motion, please.
So move.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Shainrock, seconded by Mr. Ralph to adjourn. Ms. Engel, please.
Terry Engel, aye. Travis Ralph.
Aye.
Rick Schultz.
Aye.
Joanne Maloney. Lauren Shainrock.
Aye.
Rich Mueller.
Aye.
Dan Schmidt is absent.
Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank